you've ever wondered about what the commercial real estate world looks like here in the Twin Cities, I'm so excited to interview Michael Koehler today. You've been, how many years has been now? I don't even know. It's been a long time, Michael. How many years have you
Oh,
been on commercial now?
as of next year, it'll be 40 years.
That's what I thought. I said to Carter, I think he's 40 years in now. That's what I thought. And,
Yeah.
and you're running your own company, if I remember right. I haven't caught up with you exactly. Aren't you like the owner of um your
Premise, premise commercial.
That's what I
Yeah.
thought. Yeah. And you have been for a long time. That's been part of your ecosystem. So we're going to talk about your history, but more importantly, the transformation of the city uh, right now and what's going on from your perspective. Because we do have, as you know, I've been with Mincar for 20 years, and that's how I think I met you through something commercial at one point in our life. But um, I feel like the shift since 2010 with the commercial world it's a very different city as it relates to commercial real estate, and it's a small city. So development wise, what's happening from your perspective? So it's going to be a 30-minute session on you kind of laying out the bullet points of those looking to do a startup or want a brick and mortar or are looking to invest. This is what's going on right now. And then we will hashtag you. We will load premise commercial as part of it. It's kind of a pitch on you, Michael. That makes sense?
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
Okay.
I think, when you go for the larger picture, I think I would probably ask you to kind of address where you want to go because being in the business for almost 40 years, commercial real estate is kind of cyclical, number one. And so when you say what's the market like today, maybe you could be a little more specific, Carry on.
Yeah. Well, I think it's then and now. Like, what is then look like and what is now look like as a city? I mean, and in your like a bullet point of that, where were we 40 years ago, 20 years ago, and now where are we today? And what does that landscape look like? That's really, I think, a high level rundown from a commercial broker's perspective. I think that will be super insightful for those looking at expansion. You may know that, I'm sure you know this. We've been a huge draw with businesses and are now just ranked as of this week the top city for young people to move after they graduate from college, which is really transformational as we look at the future of our city and the scope of what that looks like. So, anyway, it'll come organically. It always does. It'll just pop out of your brain. You have lots of wisdom.
Well, I think reality. When I first started in this business in 1985, technology was a big part of what the world was all about. Technology. I mean, when I first got into business, we were still working off of fax machines. Uh, so that was we had the telephone. So we had regular office phones. You had fax machines. Uh, Computers, no, didn't exist. I mean, they existed, but not in the commercial, not a PC. No, and every single desk you look at today, you have multiple screens, PCs, and so when I first got into business, commercial real estate was kind of mom and pop. Industrial buildings were built around the metro area, very close in, first tier cities being inside the 694, 494 loop.
Right.
And actually, most of the buildings that industrial buildings that were being built were, you know, 10, 15, 20,000 square feet, 15 foot, 16 foot clear, small bays. And that was the bread and butter for industrial. Office buildings were just starting to be built. We have the downtown central business district, both St. Paul and Minneapolis. But overall, I mean, the office environment, you know, didn't really grow in leaps and bounds. I mean, they built in the, 70s and 80s, they built, office towers downtown Minneapolis. The IDS tower became kind of iconic. But overall, in the business world, then it was still, it was small industrial, small. There weren't a lot of. I mean, you had General Mills and some of the big and 3M, some of the
Right.
big, corporate, home based or based in Minnesota corporations, but we didn't have the growth back then that we've experienced in the last 30, 40 years.
Right.
Um, over the years, as technology changed and more companies, this our environment has always been a very great and from a incubator standpoint of businesses starting up here,
Mhm.
and so mom and pops grew, and as they grew, we saw a lot of industrial development around the metro area. And, it was basically what we called the generic uh, development developers, where they would just go and they develop buildings and they would fill them up with tenants,
Yeah.
and then they would sell them,
Right.
and then they would move on. They would move on, build new buildings, take those same tenants, a lot of those tenants out of those buildings, and move them into their new buildings. And so it was kind of, merchant builders have done that for years. But as time has grown and as the metro area, the 7 county metro area has been, as developers have developed those kind of spaces, they there's no longer what we call infill land right now. There's the development now is basically knock over old buildings and generate new facilities.
Mhm.
But in that process, over the years, it's become naturally more and more expensive.
Right. For
You
sure.
know, for many, yeah. So I mean, I've always, my business has always been representing the client, the tenant, whether they needed to buy something, build something, lease something. That's kind of what I've done, my most of my career. I've
Mhm.
not really done a lot of listing of properties, but more of the, again, more of the representation of the tenant
Right.
or owner.
Mhm. Mhm.
So, you know, re real estate's very cyclical,
I agree.
and every 5 to 7 years, every 7, but the cycle changes over time. It's changed. And so, we had pretty, when I first got in the business, we'd have cycles that were probably everywhere 5 to 7 years,
Mhm.
where it would tend to change from the landlord's um, the real estate market favored the landlord, and then the next cycle it would favor the tenant.
Mhm.
Okay, and so real estate values go up, they go down, they go up, they go down. In the last, to get more up to date, in the last 3 to 4 years,
Mhm.
we've experienced probably one of the largest increases in net rates, cost of space to
Right.
lease, than we've ever experienced in the 40 years I've been in the business.
I agree with that. Mhm.
And the cost so the cost to develop space has gone up dramatically
Right.
after
Mhm.
COVID, just material costs,
Mhm.
because of availability and material costs just
I know.
skyrocketed. And it's like that even in the housing industry.
Mhm. Oh, yeah. Mhm.
And and so the merchant builders that were doing what we call spec space, they've kind of dropped off right now because of interest rates being high. as well as the cost of materials.
Right.
The other thing that's pushing, was pushing the marketplace, we have kind of a stagnant, not a stagnant market, but absorption in the industrial marketplace a couple years ago was, we were at 1.5 to 2% vacant in
Mm-hmm.
the whole metro area.
I know. So low.
And yeah, and the merchant builders uh, jumped on the bandwagon and started building a lot of space. There's still a high demand, but the issue now is, because the cost of capital is so high, merchant builders, or we call the spec builders, have basically pumped the brakes. They're like,
Right.
we're not doing it.
Right.
It's just it's too costly.
Well, there's no ROI to it. It doesn't make sense right now.
Correct. Correct.
Saying that, on the flip side, the construction piece, if you look at our 494 Bloomington strip and you look at the industry, the commercial space is being built out right now. Just to speak to that a little bit, there's clearly an attraction, a draw. And I do see that we're starting to have the issue of having to take down infrastructure and build new infrastructure, because the cost to do business, to right size and manipulate our old structure, is just too costly, and they got to just bring it down and start over again. What are your thoughts on that? Do you agree or disagree with me?
Oh, I agree wholeheartedly.
Mhm.
That's been the next big dilemma is, I'm working on a site for a client who bought a site a couple years ago, bought a building and extra land, and we're trying to figure out, how do we knock down the old building, or how do we even develop the extra land?
Mhm.
And the cost per square foot would is prohibitive. It's
Mhm.
prohibitive of the cost of capital, somewhere between 7.5% cost of capital, cost of materials, construction costs. It's the net rents to make that work are crazy. They're crazy expensive. And
Mhm.
but getting back a little bit to interest rates, um, there's been another surge. There's been another thing that's been affecting the industrial marketplace, and that's been investors, capital,
Mhm.
investors, institutions coming in and buying large portfolios.
I know.
And so in
I'd
the
love to hear
metro
about that.
area, well, yeah, in the metro area, we've seen in the last 5, 7 years, we've seen, major, well, I would consider small local families and companies who own large or built large portfolios of real estate
Mhm.
have slowly dissolved themselves of that space because of the low cap rates for investors.
Right.
It made it so attractive that they've sold off their a lot of their portfolios. Now, the other thing that has happened is large amounts of capital have come into our markets and have bought large portfolios. And what they were betting on is the ability to increase net rates of space
Mhm.
in order to justify their investment.
Right.
And so what's happened is, like, give an example. You know, when I first got in this business, an industrial office would cost, 6 to 7 bucks a foot
Right.
for the tenant.
Right.
And in that, the the cost of the warehouse was probably 350 to 375 a square foot.
Mhm.
Now, in our market segment, that went on for years. And so what has happened in the last 5 years, when we had inflation, higher interest rates, and a lot of capital, investment capital, they came in, bought on low cap rates, and they basically said, "We're going to wait for a better day when all these leases start to turn over. We then have the ability to increase our rents and get a much better return.
Mm-hmm.
And what's happened is, a good example, today, if I want to go and lease, let's say 25,000 square feet
Right.
in a new building today, it would probably cost me $7 to $8 net for the warehouse space,
Mm-hmm.
and the office space is 13 to 15 net.
Right.
So that's those numbers have actually, in the office market, it's doubled plus, and in the warehouse segment, it's probably doubled to tripled.
I agree. So then there's the other qualifier, right? The building infrastructure versus leasing infrastructure, because most of these leases, these tenants want to customize the space. Like there's an additional investment going on right now, and it becomes a real, it begs the question, does it make more sense to pool investors and just start from scratch, tear down and build and own, buying the property out? And can that be acquired? If it's a lease option right now, are those owners even willing to, because of the shift happening? Do you see what I'm saying? Given the shift in the market, does it make more sense to sell off that leasing product, move their money elsewhere, and then you have an investor who wants to customize, build, so they own the property? Because in the end, the longevity of that asset makes more sense for their business model. That's what I've been running into. What are your thoughts on that? Does that make sense?
It's cost prohibitive.
Yeah.
It's pretty much cost prohibitive. Um, I have probably 4 or 5 tenants clients right now that want more space.
Mm-hmm.
They want more space, and I work all over the country, so not just here, but all over the country,
Right.
and they want more space. They're growing, but the cost, when you take when it's so for, corporate America, for them to absorb a double or triple increase in net rent,
I know.
they can typically absorb it. But if you have the mom and pop or operation that wants, they have 10,000 square feet or 15,000, they want to go to 20 or 30,
Mm-hmm.
but the cost of lease is double or triple. What my clients are doing, what we're starting to do now is we're starting to say, okay, we'll try to renegotiate shorter term leases. Yesteryears used to be 5 to 7.
Right.
And so today we're saying, landlord, we really can't afford your rates, especially when they have escalating in net rents of 3.5 to 4% per year now.
Mm-hmm.
So what we're seeing in the market is, I'm advising my clients now to try to negotiate shorter term leases, 3 years or less.
Mm-hmm.
And then, to your point, Carrie Ann, we are now looking at other options, i.e., can we go buy an can we go buy a building that is obsolete?
Mm-hmm.
Can we knock it down? Can we get the footprint we want on
Right.
that site,
Mm-hmm.
and build it ourselves? And
That's what I think.
that's but that's the problem, is kind of cost prohibitive, because the cost of, if you're going to build a 100,000 square foot building today,
Mm-hmm.
on a price per square foot, it's much easier, much more economical than building a 25,000 square foot building, and making sense of the acquisition of the land, the building, and putting the building up. So
So I
that's the
do think
problem
that's
we're
our
running
I
into.
think that's our future though. So let's say it is 100,000
It
square
is.
foot building, right? That is our future realistically for the people I'm meeting. And there is some parallel here, but you're heavy handed and fully commercial and doing leasing, and you're immersed in it. Where I'm dealing with a faction that's more personal, startup business or companies that are bringing businesses in and are trying to navigate what is a very expensive environment to lease in, and future casting what their business model looks like. Is it more profitable, even though heavy handed on the front end? to build out, tear down, buy the land, tear it down, start over, build the infrastructure, set up their own leasing system, and operate their business within it. And I kind of feel like we're at that break point right now based on what's happening. That's what I think is interesting about the shift right now. What?
Uh, I I think there's some merit to that, Carrie Ann. But I think the other issue here is as I always consult with my clients, if you're a new company and you're coming in, whether you're someone that's leaving corporate America and creating, and there's a lot of that going on here in
Right.
Minnesota,
Mm-hmm.
and people are leaving corporate America and they're going out and they're creating a new company. I'm meeting with a new client this afternoon. They are now creating a new entity, new business.
Mm-hmm.
They are going out and getting. They're going out to get funding.
Right.
The problem, Carrie Ann, is simply this: when I've consulted my clients, and you put a dollar on the table, and you're saying to yourself, where does it make sense to put this dollar? Where can I turn that dollar over quicker?
Right.
Owning real estate is not a quick turnover. It is
No.
not a very liquid investment.
Agree.
So so if someone's coming into the marketplace and they say, yeah, I mean, I've been with XYZ corporate, for years, and I'm an engineer, and myself and two other friends are going to go generate and create a new company.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to go out to the world and get they're going to go out and get capital to build their business.
Right.
And it typically doesn't make any sense for new ventures
Mm-hmm.
to own real estate for anywhere from 3 to 5 years.
Yeah.
And sometimes at the end of the day, it doesn't even make sense to have that asset on the books when their return on their dollar internally is 20, 30%
I agree with
or
that.
whatever.
I completely agree with you on that. I think it depends on the story. It depends on, that's a perfect example of that, is hands down not an option. They cannot be an owner. They have to be a lease option. Where you're seeing some big franchise companies that are building out and seeing high success stories, and they're building out franchising connections all over the country right now. And those franchising needs, that's what I'm running into, need a lot of square footage, and it's customized square footage.
Oh
That's
yeah.
where I think there's a play, room in the right situation where it could have been an opportunity even a decade ago, an option. We've simply run out of space that qualifies as even an option to bring that business in the first place. And it leans into, and then of course with these business models, where you're located very much matters. And there are not many options. When you look at the metro, you've got the core of the city, northeast, southwest. You have really one spot in Minneapolis that's bonus, that's easily accessible along the Roseville, Vadnais Heights, 35W strip right there, Bloomington strip 494, Maple Grove, Lakeville, Eagan area, and then way up north, right? So we quickly lose options, and we're in need of more infrastructure. So I just think it's an interesting time that I've never seen before. In the 25 years, you've been around a lot longer than I have. And I've been, as you know, an 80/20 plan where most of my work is in residential, and I dabble in investment and do a little commercial here and there. And then you and I have just, done a little bit of work on the side on that front. My observation as a consumer and listening to all these different opportunities I have because of the relationships I build from the work I'm doing, and they're national and global. This is the first time that I've innately felt that shift in our city where we're like lacking right now, both in spatially land and qualifying the buildings that can sustain the incoming traffic. That's why I was so fascinated by the idea of having you on, because I think there's a big play in our market for the commercial world. And I don't think it's understood. Like, I don't think most of the populace really understands our city if they're looking to expand here or move here. So,
Well, let's talk. When you say franchise, can you give me what's your definition of franchise? Because
well,
um,
go
the
ahead.
reason I asked that the reason I asked that question is, I mean, I look at franchise as um, I'll just give you an example. And there's corporate stores. I think there's still actually there used to be independent stores like let's say Chick-fil-A,
Hmm.
okay, or let's say Caribou. Caribou is mostly corporate owned stores. McDonald's was is a franchise situation.
Hmm.
So, is that what you're talking about when you say franchise and
Without
investment?
getting into the weeds with specific companies, think about the Bed Bath and Beyonds of the world that are now, because of competition and online growth,
Right.
are starting to close down, as an example, right? So you've got these large buildings that have been around a long time, and the replacement versions of our future are health, wellness, body, fitness. If we're going to put a hierarchy label on it, events, we'll say, rec centers that are set up with all the creme brulee, I call it, all the glitter that these young people love. Gaming houses. I had one 2 years ago. They didn't have the investment numbers they needed, but they needed 30,000 feet for a 24/7 gaming house, basically, is what it was. It's like high tech stuff that's totally not you and I don't even play in that world at all. But that's our future. Like, that's the stuff happening right now, and it's big play. And it has to be big play because you need to have that large volume of humans coming through in order for it to be profitable. Unlike what used to be mom and pop version, because of the infiltration of online awareness, the way people experience and the way people shop are different now, right? So, as a metropolitan, because I do coach nationally and internationally with Tom Ferry, so I get an opportunity to get perspectives from other parts of the country, and not just residential, but commercial and development and growth. Sherry Schmidt, the president of our company, is very, very involved with development in our city, especially Edina and Minneapolis in the core of our city. So there are dialogues that happen that all verge or merge together. And what I'm seeing is a need for experiential space with bigger square footage that's well positioned, and that's our growth model for metropolitan cities. What was existing 20 to 40 years ago, simply not the right fit. Kind of like our housing, right? Our housing inventory. Some homes just have to come down. They just
Yeah,
the fix. Same thing with our
yeah, functionally obsolete.
correct.
Right.
That's what I think is interesting talking to you, because you've watched the evolution, Michael, of this city. And I think we're a very dynamic city in the playing field of attraction. And I see we're at a pivotal place where our infrastructure needs are changing. And I think it'll be interesting on how it impacts our leasing community, because the math is starting to make not sense. So does the new infrastructure
Yeah.
allow for a leasing component? Does it marry perhaps where the
Well,
leasing needs are now supported in a way that is sustainable while at the same time building new infrastructure? I think that's what I'm trying to say. What are your thoughts on that?
well, I think you're right. I mean, what is going on is developers have realized that we just can't keep on going out and out and out. Okay, I mean,
Uh-uh.
there's people would love 20 or 30,000 square feet, but they want to be in Roseville, or
Right.
they want to be centrally located, right?
Exactly
They
my
don't
point.
they don't want to drive to Rosemont, or
Ew.
don't want to drive to Newmarket, or they don't want to drive to Hugo. You know, they need to service. the metro area,
They need to
right?
service
So,
the cities I just talked about because that's our
right,
city. We've got the core,
right,
we've got northeast, southwest, perimeter tier one, and that's where we need the infrastructure.
right. So what I think is going to happen, interest rate as when interest rates come down, and as they come down, we are seeing, developers are kind of looking at buildings as people stop using them. I think that's probably the better way of saying it. As some companies just say we're done, we don't we need more space.
Mhm.
Some of them can afford to move out to the second
Right.
ring suburbs. But on the other side, as they leave, to your point earlier, you're seeing boutique. I call them boutique developers. They're like not the big developers, but they'll come in and they'll say, okay, we're going to go develop 20 or 30,000 square feet of quasi retail space or quasi industrial space. I have a client right now. We're contemplating, as I told you earlier, building a 25 or 30 or 35,000 square foot multi-tenant building
Mhm.
that has functionality to it, for smaller users.
Right.
And, but to your point, over time, we are going to have to knock down buildings. We are going to have to start redoing our first tier suburbs. We're just
I
going to need
totally
to.
think that. I don't
Uh,
see how we can get around it. I
we
don't see
can.
how we can get around it. I won't speak to which dealership, but you know which one it is. I was over there yesterday on the 35 strip. It's over in Badness Heights, by Roseville, been around a long time. And 8 million plus price tag. And it's got great square footage, but there are limitations to so many. It becomes a very narrow market. Um, the usability of that space is very, very small and narrow, right? And
Right.
but the land is invaluable. And what could happen there is incredible because of the location. That, in my mind, is an example of creating infrastructure that's married in a way where you've got local money building infrastructure that meets the need of the larger 30, 40, 50,000 square foot user and that wants to own a portion of it. And then there's a leasing marriage as part of. So I see it being a marriage of ownership and leasing together where the way the old way is now a marriage of multiple investors carrying the weight of growth and allowing for those that want who own to own and those that want to lease that's a part of it. That's what I see in my crazy creative head here. As I'm talking to people and looking at it, it's like, how do you make this work? Because the land is accommodating of more than one individual needs. Does that make sense? That's what I see.
Yeah, it does. But the other issue that, and I don't, I'm sure you deal with it too in the residential, the land usage, cities in today's world, they don't want industrial.
Mm-mm.
Okay, cities don't want them, so they want they want flowers. They want nice looking storefronts or nice looking spaces up front. They don't want truck traffic.
Mhm.
So the cities, as they go in and rezone uh, areas, if you give an example, even let's say an auto dealership somewhere. Let's say there's an auto dealership that is no longer usable, and so the land goes up for sale because of the cost of land. You hit a valid point. Because of the cost of land, the geographics. The old rule of thumb uh, in real estate is three rules: location, location,
And
location. And
location.
so, yeah, right. And so the
Yeah.
the problem the problem there in today's world is that the cost of land, let's say that, let's say a dealership land becomes available, okay?
Mm-hmm.
That will no longer 90% of the time, it will no longer be zoned for auto dealers because the city doesn't want that. They call it an eyesore. What
Mm-hmm.
they want, and the people that can afford to pay the most for that land is someone who's developing residential apartments.
Mm-hmm.
That's the highest priced land out there. Then right after that is retail. And then after that is, well, it's office space too, but nobody's building office space, right? Nobody's doing that right now. So it's always the issue will always be into your, I agree with what you're saying, Carrie Ann, but the issue is always going to be it's going to be the arm wrestle for highest and best use,
Right.
highest and best use of the land for the cost for the tax dollar, you know, and so residential and retail will always kind of do the arm bending, but then medical office buildings are kind of the hot spot right now. And in the medical marketplace, as you know, Minnesota's big in medical,
Yep.
and so there's a lot of people that are doing startup medical companies here in Minnesota,
Mm-hmm.
and and so you know, as a matter of fact, Ryan Companies is building a large campus up in the Plymouth area,
Yeah, I
over a
know.
million square feet that will be medical slash it'll be medical device companies. It'll be kind of like a incubator, like you made it, it'll be an incubator space for medical. So,
Mm-hmm.
you know, so some people are doing it at certain segments of the real estate marketplace in terms of what you called earlier about, well, we need this area that we can have people can come in, they can lease, they can own,
Mm-hmm.
and they can and stuff like that. But it's a bigger picture, and it's that in itself is a reuse of space too. So
I
they're
think so
knocking
too.
buildings down there, and you look at down in Egan, there was a very large acquisition of buildings down there recently, and the developer is going to knock all of them but one down of office space
Right.
and start redeveloping.
Well, that's what I see.
So,
Yeah,
yeah.
for sure. Mm-hmm. I think it's fascinating. So if there is an investor or a client that would be interested in exploring this a little bit more, how do they find you, Michael? How do people find you so we can make sure to link you up with any questions? Because this is highly informative, good intelligence, and certainly we could go for hours having this conversation. See it being a highly creative space right now with lots of ideas that are solution based ideas. I see there still be a very dynamic time over starting now moving forward in our city. And I think it's really exciting. I think it's highly valuable to have a veteran broker who knows the city as well as you do. So really wonderful to pick your brain a little bit. How do people get a hold of you?
Well, my company name is Premise Commercial Real Estate,
Mm-hmm.
and the best place to get a hold of me is my cell phone
There you
because
go.
I'm never really in my office, but um, I can
We'll
I
have it all
can
linked up on our
yeah.
when we drop. We're going to have everything linked up so we can make sure to connect you with Michael if you have any questions. And remember, Michael is very involved nationally and on the commercial front, not just in our Twin Cities area. So, if you are thinking about expansion or considering a move here or elsewhere as it relates to commercial work, Michael, I will personally say, is an absolute high recommendation. Great wealth of knowledge. Great wealth of knowledge. Michael, thank you so
Thank you,
much.
Marianne.
I really appreciate it. Thank you. So I am going to do two things, Michael, because I didn't want to interrupt because that was such a great start. So we're going to do a quick intro and then I'm going to do the outro with him on the screen and then you can blend it. So before I do that, before I leave Michael today, Michael, do you have anything else you'd like to share to the audience?
No, it just basically, premise commercial real estate. I'm a longtime member of an organization called SIOR, and that's an international uh, organization that basically is the bulk of their membership is individual practitioners that typically represent companies.
Oh,
And so,
interesting.
yeah, so I can be found on sior.com. And like I said, I've been a member since 1996.
Wow. Amazing.
And yeah, so it's been a while. It's been a while. And like I said, I have three clients that I do national work, and so I'm working all over on West Coast right now, mid United States and East Coast right
How
now.
fun.
So uh so what I can do is I also I can look into any market with expertise in that marketplace and give clients a good feeling or a good idea of whether they want to be there or as they expand their business as well as being in the metro area. So I can do both.
Thank you, Michael Koehler, for being with us today. We really, really appreciate the time. So knowledgeable, valuable information as it relates to commercial work happening both locally and nationally. Thank you for being with us today on Fly the Coop. Don't forget to click and subscribe to our YouTube channel to watch all of our interviews, lifestyle, and listing shows. See you next time.